So a couple of years ago, I was having a beer with a couple of my friends on my terrace, and it was a cloudy, drizzly day, and we were all talking about our childhood days. It was a good day. I got up to go to the table with the icebox to get another beer when suddenly everything blacked out. The next thing that I saw, I was suddenly at a train station which looked like it was from the 1800s. I don't even know if trains existed back then, but based on the architecture of the station and the people's clothing, it felt like it was around this time period. I was standing under a giant rock trying to make out of this place what I could, and what just suddenly happened to me. When I realized that I had a ticket in my hand which said first class reservation from Brussels to Macleod. At this point, I would like to clarify that I'm from India, and back then I still hadn't traveled to Europe, so at that moment I was still very confused as to where I was and why I had that ticket in my hand. I felt a sense of urgency as the train was ready to leave, and the clock under which I was had struck 12:15 p.m., and the departure time had already passed. But the train was still at the platform, blowing its old steam horn. The engine looked brand new, but it was a steam engine like the olden days. I was completely baffled by what was happening, and at this point I saw a man staring directly at me. He was wearing a penguin suit and wore a tall hat and had a huge mustache. His look was more of wherein I felt he knew something like I wasn't supposed to be there. Just at that moment, everything snapped back, and I remember lying down on my terrace with both of my friends standing over me terrified. I was back. I asked them what happened, and they told me what they saw. They said while I was walking towards the table with the icebox, I froze stiff and fell on the ground as if I was a statue, and I was out for about 2 or 3 seconds at the most. They saw me falling and came running, calling out to my name, and I just came back to my senses all of a sudden. The feeling was very weird because they said that I was out for only 2 or 3 seconds, but what I remembered from my experience at the station, I was there for much longer. I remember being at the station for about 10 to 15 minutes, closely watching everything and everyone that was around me. To this day, I believe that somehow I slipped into another reality, and the man who looked at me, the face of whom I still remember very clearly, and I will never forget, that man somehow realized of my slippage into another time period, and somehow he was able to send me back. So I just remember something that happened 8 years ago when I was 16 living at home. My little sister was 8 at the time and had a really bad tendency to sleepwalk. We lived in a big house and would find her in various places, the laundry room, bathroom, kitchen, etc. My room was on the other side of the house from hers. One evening I set my book down and I tried to fall asleep. Right as I laid my head on the pillow and closed my eyes, I was startled by a rustling noise. I looked over and saw my sister in the glow of my nightlight scavenging through all of my stuff on the floor. To be honest, I was a pig during my teenage years, and the floor of my room was covered in random stuff. My first reaction was being angry that she was in my room, snooping through my crap at such an absurd hour. I snapped at her and asked what the heck she was doing in my room. She replied, "I'm looking for something," and I told her to go to bed, flipped over, and stared at the wall in a teenage angst while I waited for her to leave. The strange part was I never heard her come into the room, and my door was shut during the entire encounter. All of a sudden, it hit me that she was probably sleepwalking, and I sprung up from my bed to make sure that she didn't fall down the staircase on her way back to her room. This realization happened maybe 5 seconds after I told her to get out, and she was already gone from my room. The strange part was, too, that the door wasn't even open. So what I'm trying to say basically is I never even heard her come in or even leave my room at any point, which is really bizarre. I ran out the door thinking that I had just missed her, and she was nowhere to be found. I walked to her room on the other side of the house, and she was in the bed, tucked in her blankets. Obviously, she did not move from that position all night. I started to panic and thought there was an intruder in the house. I ran to my parents' room crying and told them that somebody was in my room. They woke up, searched the house, and everything was normal. They dismissed it and said that I was just having a nightmare. I spent all of these years thinking that it was a ghost because the encounter felt almost sinister, if you know what I mean. Now I wonder if she possibly astral traveled or astral projected or teleported to my room. There is no doubt that a person was in my room and that person was my sister. But I wonder what she was searching for. My dad was a swinging bachelor in the 1960s. Before he met my mom, he'd go scuba diving in the Caribbean, skiing in Canada, and all sorts of other adventures with his group of buddies. For his bachelor party in 1969, they all went to Florida and rented a boat to take to the Bahamas. One of his good friends asked if he could bring along a friend that he called Jack. My dad said sure, and found Jack to be pretty square, if you know what I mean. A staunch Republican and a real company man who worked for IBM. And they all got along okay, but they didn't really hit it off that well to become friends. My mom doesn't even recall asking Jack to the wedding, though they saw each other once or twice at the friend in common's house, which would have been in the early 70s. Shortly afterwards, Jack got transferred and he and his family moved across the country. This also would have been in the early 1970s. My parents got a few Christmas cards from them over the years, but they never reunited or even spoke again, either in person or over the telephone. Definitely not friends and barely meeting the definition of acquaintances at that point. Fast forward to last year, my mom called me, flustered because she had gotten an email from Jack. The email address included his correctly spelled first and last name, the last name having an unusual spelling. It was just a sentence or two saying hi. He wanted to get in touch and hoped that it was not too late. It was signed Love Jack, which frankly weirded out my mom. I suggested that she Google him to try to find his contact info to give him a call and see what this was all about. Maybe dementia? However, when she Googled, she found an obituary dated over a year before the day she had received the email from him. I had a lot of questions, as you could imagine. Several people had assured me that Jack's computer must have been hacked. But how did Jack, hence the hackers, get my mom's email address too? They had never even spoken, let alone exchanged email addresses. Only a couple of Christmas cards 40 plus years ago. And my mom's email address does not contain her first or last name. It's a combination of her favorite flower and some random numbers and the name of one of our cherished family dogs. There was zero chance that Jack could have guessed any of that, and the friend in common passed away in the 1980s, so it definitely wasn't him who gave Jack my mom's email address, since nobody had them. Also, I did some research, and the email address used by Jack is linked to a house in the same small town that he lived in, and the white pages indicated that a woman with his wife's name still lived there. Several months ago, when this happened, I had my mom forward me the email from Jack, and I responded to it with a simple, "Is this you, Jack? What do you want? Please respond." It's been months, and there haven't been any answers. My husband and I live in Arizona, but we've been with family in California since the holidays and have only returned home last night. While we were in California, my husband had lost his wallet. We spent days searching his parents' entire house and turned the room that we stayed in upside down looking for it. He even had his brother with him cleaning out the car while looking for the wallet, but we couldn't figure out where he had put it. We knew he had brought his wallet with him to Cali because we both used it while we were paying for different things. It was like we had to use it today and then tomorrow, and then it was misplaced somewhere. We couldn't find it, and so he ended up ordering a new license, etc. Fast forward to today. I'm in our bedroom, and my husband's in his game room playing on his PC. and out of nowhere I hear him call out to me, and he's freaking out. He runs to our room and shows me his wallet. He said that it was sitting right on top of his PC console. We couldn't believe it. At first I thought maybe somebody played some kind of a sick practical joke on us, but why would anybody do that? And then I heard about this forum and I thought immediately that a glitch is probably what we experienced. I was in London at a gig a year or so ago with my mate. I went to get us drinks from the bar and my card got declined. I checked my online banking and there was more than enough money to pay for the drinks, so I went to the cash machine outside of the club. Bear in mind, I was completely sober at this point, so my judgment was still sound. I put my card in the machine and it said that it was invalid or something, so the machine ate it and didn't give it back. Me and my mate are entirely 1,000% convinced that this machine did not spit out the card. As I mentioned earlier, we were sober. A week later, I opened up my wallet, and there it is. This is like an 8-hour drive from London, where I was too. We can't wrap our heads around the situation. The ATM definitely ate the card. I was singing in the shower the other day, and I stopped for a split moment to bend down to get some shampoo. As I went to do this, I heard myself singing, but my mouth never opened. I don't have schizophrenia or anything like that, and I don't know what could make that kind of a noise. It was the same song, it was my voice, but I wasn't singing, and when I went to open my mouth to ask if somebody was there, right away, immediately when I went to do that, the singing just stopped. I also wasn't listening to any other music, so it couldn't have been any of their voices. I sing a cappella in the shower from time to time. I asked my roommates if they were playing music or singing in the shower themselves on the opposite side of the wall, and they said that they were all in the living room playing a board game. The voice was clear, as if it was coming from my own mouth. The shower that I shower in has a pretty harsh water pressure, so it's very loud to hear anything over it. I can't think of how this could have happened, and it's been plaguing my mind a lot. I don't drink often, and I wasn't under the influence when this happened. I've never done any kinds of mind-altering substances. I'm terrified and unsure as to what happened. I have no logical explanation for it. I'm floored, basically. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before or since. I work in a bubble tea store, and every night we do a lot of final cleaning and whatnot that usually takes me 15 minutes before everything is clean and turned off. On that day, I glanced at the clock, and the moment it struck 8 p.m., I started to close everything down. After a while, I finally finished cleaning everything, and I looked at the clock again, and it said 8 o'clock. It was still 8 o'clock. I was super confused and thought maybe the clock on the wall was broken or something. Nope, my phone also showed that it was 8 o'clock. Even more confusing was that when I asked my manager for the video clip from the camera for that day, that video file was the only one that got corrupted somehow, and it recorded nothing for that whole day. I still have no clue what happened, but at least I managed to catch an earlier bus. Someone was asking if the clock was broken. It was working perfectly fine, and the clock was still ticking normally before and after the time slip. I usually arrive at work quite early in the day, often in the very early hours of the morning, 3, 4, maybe 5 a.m. My office is within a skyscraper that also houses a shopping mall and a high-end apartment block. I usually make a habit of parking near the apartment block area to avoid getting my car scratched by the shoppers once the mall is open. Yesterday, though, something felt very wrong. Nothing was in the garage. I made my way all the way into the garage before I realized that there was nothing there. No cars, no people, no snaking system of vents and wires hanging from the ceiling. It was just me, silence, and almost nothing else. I panicked and did a 180 to make my way out of there, but on my way back, I was stopped by a security guard, who asked me where I was going in such a hurry. I almost told him what was going on, but then I looked around me, and as I did so, everything was seemingly back to normal now. The parking lot went from empty to nearly packed, and everything else looked normal, though some of the cars did appear oddly parked and slightly weird looking, but things are nevertheless normal for the rest of the day. I'm just a bit shook and confused right now. I saw something like this before, and I was able to convince myself that it was just prolonged stress causing some kind of a hallucination. But now it's back, and I question reality more just a bit this time than I did before. This happened about 6 weeks ago. I was sitting at a red light, and it was around 11:30 a.m., so there wouldn't be any school buses driving around, or not that many, I guess I should say. I suddenly felt really uneasy for no reason. I looked in my rearview mirror, and a school bus was coming full speed towards me and heading for the back of my car. I just braced myself because there was nothing else that I could do at that point. I waited and waited. Nothing happened. There was no impact and no sound of a bus swerving and driving past me at all, let alone rear-ending me from the back. I looked around, and the whole intersection was run down, and nobody was in front or behind of me, but I could have sworn there had been cars there earlier. Something seemed very, very off, in the most unsettling way possible. I felt sick to my stomach. Everything looked slightly off, and then all of a sudden, a car honked, and its horn was right behind me. I looked back and then back towards the intersection, and then cars had just suddenly reappeared out of nowhere. I drove home confused and dazed. I looked back at that moment when I got home, and something was weird about the bus that never hit me. It wasn't new, and after some research, I found out that the bus that I saw and everything around me appeared to be from the early 1960s. Everything in that moment appeared to have been at some point in the past. I was so confused in that moment I didn't even notice that there were no buildings at that intersection the way there should have been. So in conclusion, I know this sounds crazy, but I think that I may have traveled back in time for a brief moment. I still don't understand everything about what happened that day, but when I take into account everything that I saw and experienced and why everything looked so dated, it was almost like I was put in another timeline and then brought back to where I am today. That's the only explanation that I have.